Welcome to episode 2 of 5 for Podcasting. I'm your host, Anish Patel, and we have quite a bit to cover today. Before we get into everything, I want to first uh, tell everybody that listen and subscribe to the first episode. Big thank you. We had a pretty good listenership for the first week. Looking, obviously to grow that and gain some momentum moving forward. But to everybody that did subscribe, did follow, gave the first episode a listen, a big thank you goes out to you. For the new listeners, welcome, and you can stay up to date with the podcast by following on social media. We have Instagram, Twitter. You can follow at 5, that's the number 5, for podcasting, no spaces. And you can follow myself personally as well if you'd like on Twitter at avpatel730. Now that we got all the formalities out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into this week's episode. First thing I want to talk about is the NHL bubble and the NHL qualifying round. A lot of chaos, a lot of chaos. For the most part, a lot of the lower seeds actually advanced to the actual playoffs. We had Chicago advancing as a 12 seed. We had Arizona advancing as the 11 seed. Um, and both of those teams, are more than deserving to be there. Every team that was in the qualifying round really deserved to be there at the end of the day. That kind of brings me to my next point with the Predators. As I mentioned in the first episode, I'm a big Nashville Predators fan, and uh, it was very frustrating this past week to see how everything unfolded with their qualifying round. Now, watching them the whole season, I can't tell you that I'm surprised that this is the way that the season ended. Knew there was a lot of issues that needed to be fixed. Knew that we needed depth scoring from all the lines, and knew that we needed to get some solid goaltending, which we didn't get any of that in the 4 games that we played against Arizona. Now, like I said, am I surprised that the Preds disappointed again? Not really, to a certain extent. Uh, this is just kind of what, as a Preds fans, we've become accustomed to over the last couple of years, ever since they made that Stanley Cup run. Now, we have a group chat with a lot of my college buddies, and we talk about sports and amongst other things. But when we're talking about sports and our favorite teams, a lot of obscenities get thrown around. I'm not gonna lie, we're pretty ruthless when it comes to criticizing our teams when they're not playing the way they should be. And one of my buddies in the group chat, shout out to Brandon Boyd, came up with a very colorful commentary on and how he described the Predators and how they played over the 4 games in the bubble. So if there's any kids listening right now, go ahead and put earmuffs on, because this is it's definitely not something that you want to hear. But his exact words on what he called the Preds players, he called them limp dick fuckers. And I can't say that I disagree with him. I mean, they had a chance. They were well rested. They were the better team on paper, top to bottom, on offense, defense, goaltending, and they just laid an egg out there. And it wasn't for, and I will say, it wasn't for the top line. Philip Forsberg, Victor Arvidsson, Ryan Johansson, Roman Yossi, Ryan Ellis, they all played lights out. If we could roll them out for 40 minutes a game, we probably would have won. But guess what? It's a team sport, and playing 40 minutes a game is nearly impossible in a 60-minute game. So it is what it is. And the Preds disappointed, and that's just kind of, where we'll leave that. Now, a couple of other notes from the qualifying round. The Maple Leafs and Columbus Blue Jackets series actually turned out really, really well. And I kind of talked about it a little bit last week on the first episode, that the series had potential to go 5 games, and it did. But in order to get it to 5 games, the Leafs had to mount a serious comeback in Game 4. They were down 3-0 with about 6 minutes left to play, and they pulled a very, very gutsy move by pulling their goalie with 6 minutes left to play, down three. Now I understand they had to do it. If they didn't, they weren't going to put themselves in a chance to potentially tie the game. Now, when they pulled the goalie, they actually got 2 goals pretty quick. 2 goals within, I believe it was a minute and a half of each other, and then it kind of stalled a little bit. Columbus played a little bit tighter, and then finally, in the last 40 seconds of the game, the Leafs were able to tie the game up and send it to overtime, and that's where they were able to win the game in overtime with Austin Matthews with the snipe um, to send it to Game 5 and to keep the Leafs hopes alive. Now, Game 5 was a different story. They got shut out. Columbus was had a better game plan of how they wanted to approach the game, and they executed it, plain and simple. And unfortunately, with for the NHL, after the qualifying rounds, a lot of their big guns were out of the playoffs. You have the Pittsburgh Penguins with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. They're out of the playoffs. You had the Maple Leafs with Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner and John Tavares. You had Roman Yossi with the Predators. Um, the list goes on and on. There's so many great players. Not to mention Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in Edmonton. It's unfortunate for the NHL how it played out, but if you're gonna have something like this, where you're gonna invite more teams to the bubble, and you're gonna make it a playoffs from the start, it's bound to happen. And that's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles with that. Now, with the teams that got eliminated from the first round, the qualifying round of the playoffs, they all actually had a 12.5% chance of getting the first pick in the NHL draft. And to get a talent like Alexis Lafreniere, who is pretty damn good if you ask me. You can look up his highlights, but he is definitely a franchise game changer for anybody who got that first pick. Now, as a Preds fan, this is what I was hoping for when we lost. I was hoping that the ping pong balls will fall in our favor and we would get the number one pick and get a stud offensive talent that the franchise has pretty much been lacking. They have not really had a stud franchise offensive player. Now, guys like Victor Arvidsson and Philip Forsberg on today's team, they have the potential of getting there, but I don't think they're they're quite there yet. We've had guys in the past like Paul Correa. We had Peter Forsberg when he was pretty much past his prime, but he still could produce to a certain level. But this was what I was excited for. I was excited to get a potential guy that could really set our franchise straight. Now, when it came to actually drawing the ping pong balls on Monday night, it ended up that the New York Rangers ended up getting the first pick. And it is what it is. Every team there had a chance to uh, every team there had a chance to get that first pick. Now, a lot of people on Twitter were talking about how they rigged it, how they rigged the Rangers, a big market team, to get the first pick. Well, I don't really buy all that because if the NHL really wanted to rig it, wouldn't you want a team with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, or a team with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl to get the first pick? So it doesn't really make sense to me. Now, another thing I wanted to touch base with the NHL lottery is, as much as I wanted the number one pick for the Preds, at the end of the day, I feel that the Preds have a system issue. It's not necessarily a player or a coach or a GM per se. It's all around. There's a whole system issue there. For some reason, offensive players come to Nashville to die. I mean, there's no better way of putting it. We've seen players leave Nashville and actually become better. Guys like Kevin Fiala, who started producing in Minnesota. We had guys like Colin Wilson, who has played pretty well in Colorado. It's just it's a list of players that when they leave Nashville, for some reason, I don't know if it's a better opportunity or they get more chances to play, whatever the case may be, They just seem to perform better. So not quite sure what that is, but you know, not getting the number one pick, maybe looking back at it, probably not the worst thing if we can't fix what what the real issue is with the Predators, and that's a system issue. Now, that's enough talk about the NHL. I want to get into the PGA Championship a little bit. A big weekend for golf. The first major was back this weekend, and it was a good one. I mean, you had a lot of the big names were in it in up until the last day. Brooks Koepka was right there. He kind of collapsed on the last day though. Shot a +4. Talked a big game Saturday night going into Sunday. Wasn't able to back it up. Now, one thing I was worried about that I had listened to a bunch of people talk about, read about, were the weather conditions in San Francisco for this tournament. There were a lot of late starts, lot of late tee times, and the big concern with that was the weather for those late starts. In San Francisco, the later in the evening you go, it gets a little windier, gets a little chillier. The greens aren't as friendly with the bounces, so it was a concern for all the people that had a tee time later in the afternoon. Now, uh, with that being said, a lot of the big guns were able to handle that pretty well. Um, you know, you had Dustin Johnson who was there, the whole weekend, right in it till the end. You had Bryson DeChambeau, who honestly I thought after he made that 95-foot putt on Saturday, I believe it was. Once he made that, I thought it was his tournament to lose, to be honest. Um, you know, when you make a putt like that, I mean, you've got all the momentum going for you at the end of the day. But that wasn't the case. Bryson DeChambeau, he was in it. He was competing, but the winner of the PGA Championship, Colin Morikawa, he actually just ice in his veins. He played a solid 4 rounds. He never wavered. He never let the situation get the better of him. And he went out Sunday, did what he needed to do, and closed it out. He took the win. Uh, on the flip side, you had Dustin Johnson, who was probably the favorite going into Sunday. He kind of played it safe. He actually kind of went into Sunday playing for pars. And I think that lack of aggressiveness actually cost him the PGA Championship. And it is what it is. But Colin Morikawa, shout out to him. He did a fantastic job. He did what he needed to do to win that tournament. And I'm excited for the rest of the majors for the rest of the year. Golf is back, and it was fun to watch. Um, I did kind of miss the crowd a little bit when big shots were made, but you know what? If it means we can have golf and have sports back, I'm okay with that. Now, moving on to the NBA, a lot to talk about. Lot to talk about with the NBA. First thing I want to talk about is Luka Doncic. That guy is an absolute beast. Now, I watched the game the other day um, against Milwaukee, and first of all, he had a triple double. I believe his numbers were 34, 19, and 14, if I'm correct. And that's amazing. I mean, the guy can pretty much do it all. He can drive, he can shoot. His I would say his 3 pointers probably need a little bit of work, but once he gets that down, I mean, he's already a top 10 player in the league in my books right now, and he's only going to get better. He's only 21 years old. I don't see a situation where a guy like this in his second year in the league, um, he's just getting better and better every game he plays. And he's really been one of the top players in the bubble right now. I mean, just take the Milwaukee game, for example. In overtime, first of all, he kind of willed that team back to get them to overtime. And then in overtime, he had this ridiculous through the legs pass to a teammate for a finish. I mean, not many players in the league right now can make that pass. I'd probably say LeBron and Curry are probably the only two that could really make that type of pass right now. Um, he's just awesome. I mean, there's no better way to put it. In my opinion, I think he's going to be an MVP candidate within the next 4 or 5 years, if not sooner. And I honestly think in 5 years he'll probably be the best player in the league. And I say that pretty confidently. Um, and it's unfortunate for them. Their seeding is kind of locked already, and they're probably going to play the Clippers in the first round. Um, which is kind of unfortunate for them because this is kind of Luca's this is kind of Luca's first time on the big stage to shine, and he's going to run into a tough team with two all stars that can really lock him down with Kawhi and Paul George. Now, how Luka will respond to that will tell everything. If he can somehow drag that series out to a 6-7 game series while being the best player in the series, I think that's going to go a long way for him. But if it's a 4 game sweep or a 5 game series and Luka's not really doing much, we'll see how he responds to that coming next year. But I do think going up against the Clippers in that first round, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for the first time in the playoffs. So um, another team, as I mentioned last week, that I really like is Portland. And Damian Lillard is an absolute monster right now. Uh, and he's in the last 2 games he's played against Dallas yesterday and against Philadelphia the day before. He has a combined 112 points. 112 points. Let that sink in. 51 against Philadelphia, 61 against Dallas. That's unreal. Unreal. And this is coming off of the Clippers game where he missed 2 crucial free throws at the end of the game to really send that game to overtime. So, and with those 2 missed free throws, it was funny watching because you had guys like Pat Beverly and Paul George kind of mocking the Dame time, pointing at the watch, and really really trash talking him. And Paul George was waving him off the court, shades of last year when Damian Lillard hit the game winner, game winning three in Game 7 to send Oklahoma City home, and he waved them off the court. And I thought with all that, I thought Damian Lillard's response after the game was great. He said that by them doing that for him, it was a show of respect to him that they respected everything that he's done to them in the past. And he cited sending Paul George home early last year, and he cited sending Pat Beverly home a few years ago in the playoffs. So Damian Lillard's walked the walk already. He's talked the talk, walked the walk. He's already sent these guys home before in the playoffs. So for them to trash talk, for Pat Beverly, that's just who he is. He's gonna do that regardless of who he's going up against. That's his nature. But for a guy like Paul George, who hasn't really had much playoff success in quite a few years, he really has no room to talk. I mean, you need to go out there, worry about getting past the first round, which he hasn't done in quite some time, and just play your game. Let the guys like Pat Beverly do the talking since that's who they are. Now, Portland is really poised to get into that 8 seed and play in that 8-9 double elimination playoff to get into the playoffs. Memphis is in a free fall right now. San Antonio is right there. They are, they are clawing and scratching and somehow in it as they are every year. DeMar DeRozan is leading this team. Uh, is he putting up big stats? Not by any means, but he's a guy who can create his own shot at the end of the game. He's a guy who can make 15-footers consistently. And he's a guy that Popovich can go to with confidence to close a game out or to potentially tie or take a lead in a game. And that's something that the Spurs have just always had. I mean, if you think about it, the Spurs have always had that one guy they can always go to. And same thing now with DeMar DeRozan. Like I said, he's not going to put up flashy numbers. He's not necessarily going to be a consistent all star, but he's a guy who's consistent day in and day out. You know what you're going to get from him, and you have a guy who can create your own shot, which in the playoffs is a must. You can never get enough of those guys. Now, the team that is the hottest team in the bubble. that I was dead wrong on my take of them last week, and a lot of analysts were dead wrong on with their takes of them is the Suns. Last week, I said on this podcast that I don't see a point of the Suns being there, and boy was I wrong. They are undefeated in the bubble. They are playing well. They they have a team that finally seems to be putting everything together. Everybody's healthy, everybody knows their role, and everybody is contributing. I mean, DeAndre Ayton has turned into a different player in this bubble. I don't know if it's just the no fans. I don't know if it's the feel of a scrimmage, but he just looks comfortable. And that's kind of what we were expecting when the Suns drafted him first overall. The Suns, they also have Ricky Rubio, who's a veteran presence. He doesn't have a lot of playoff experience, but he's a veteran guy who can make the right plays and can elevate others around him, which there aren't many of those guys around. And he's the perfect complement to Devin Booker. Devin Booker, we know, is an absolute. He's a gem. He is a top flight scorer. Um, Defense, obviously could use a little work on, but he is an all-star in the league. Now, the biggest knock on Devin Booker is that he's never played in any big games. And it's an understandable knock. I mean, how do you know how someone's going to respond to a big game situation if they've never been in that situation? I think that's why he got a lot of flack for not going to play for Team USA in the World Championships because those are big game minutes. I mean, yeah, you may not be playing against top talent all the time, but you're playing in meaningful games. And the reps in meaningful games are just as important as practice and putting up shots in the gym with nobody around. Statistically speaking, if you look at all the players who have gone and played for Team USA, the next following year, they've usually had their best statistical year uh, of their career. Not maybe not of their career, but they've taken that next jump of their statistical side of their career, and it's just a fact. I mean, like I said, you can go back and look at it. LeBron, D Wade, Chris Bosh after the '08 Olympics. You have guys like Paul George, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook. They've all gone through that Team USA system and have come back better because of it. And again, that's because of those big game reps. I mean, when you're playing for Team USA, you're playing meaningful games against some pretty good talent around the world. Like I said, you're not going to be playing the best talent all the time, but when you're going against the likes of Spain and Argentina, those guys have talent, and you're going to be playing some meaningful minutes in those games. So that's kind of where the situation is in the Western Conference. Um, you know, Portland, I think Portland's gonna get in the 8th seed. I think the Suns, if they keep playing the way they are, they I think have a chance to get into that 9 seed. And it looks like it may be, in my opinion, I think it's gonna be Portland for sure. And I think they're gonna be going against the Suns in the double elimination play in round. Now in the East, everything's pretty much set. I mean, Washington is not going to get in. It is just what it is. They don't have Beal, they don't have Wall. Um, they're just kind of there. And it's unfortunate, but that is the situation. Now, the big news out of the East is that Philadelphia has lost Ben Simmons for the rest of the playoffs. Okay. Um, Now, I've kind of been on the fence of is this a bad thing for Philly or is it actually a good thing for Philly? Because if you look at the roster, when you have a guy like Simmons and a guy like Joel Embiid, who are your two best players, their games are very similar. Simmons does not shoot threes. He's a driver. That's his game. He likes to penetrate the paint and either kick the ball out or finish at the rim. And Embiid is one of the best centers in the league right now. And when you have him in the paint is going to clog a lot of that up for Simmons. And I think that's where the struggles have been for Philly is that they have not, for some reason, they haven't been able to figure out how to stagger their minutes so that one or the other is on the floor. Because when you have one guy on the floor at a time, they actually play great. The team complements each other. They know how to work around the one guy that's on the floor, whether it be Ben Simmons, whether it be Joel Embiid. They know how to work around that situation depending on who's on the floor. The problem is when they're both on the floor and Brett Brown, their coach, Philadelphia's coach, this is kind of the biggest knock on him is he just doesn't know how to manage the minutes for his players. I mean, at the end of the day, for him, I can only assume that he's thinking that these are my two-star players. I got to play them all the time together to give myself the best opportunity to win. But that's not the case here. I mean, you look at that first game without Ben Simmons. They granted they also didn't have Embiid, but they were playing their butts off. Philly was. I mean, the players knew their roles. They knew how to complement off each other. They knew how to. They knew what each other's strengths were in order to be successful in that game. And if Philly is going to have any success, they're going to have to learn how to play that way with just Embiid on the floor. And I think they will. I think it takes a lot of pressure off the coaching staff. I think it takes a lot of pressure off of the players. And I think it takes a lot of pressure off of Embiid, to be honest with you. Because now that Simmons is out, Embiid is more free to play his style of game. Now, don't get me wrong, Embiid has flaws as well. The biggest knock on Embiid is that for some reason he loves to play out of the paint more than he likes to play in the paint, which doesn't make any sense to me. Like I said, he's probably the best center in the league right now, if not one of the best centers. Him and Jokic are probably the two, and he can dominate any matchup that he wanted to in the paint if he wanted to, but he likes to play outside. He likes to linger around the 3 point line. Now, was part of that because Simmons was on the floor as well? Could be. So we'll see how that kind of all plays out moving forward. I do know though that the season, these 8 game regular season is going to end on Friday. I'm assuming the double elimination playing games will probably be over the weekend, and then first round of games will either start next Monday or Tuesday. So I'm excited. I'm excited to watch Portland to see if they can get in. I'm excited to see Portland against the Lakers if that's the case, because as I mentioned last week, I think Portland has a really good chance of definitely taking the Lakers to a 6 or 7 game series, if not potentially upsetting them. The problem with the Lakers is they don't have any guards that could really go at McCollum and Lillard. You know, it's funny to say now, but Avery Bradley and Rondo, you know, while they're not the same players they used to be, they're very serviceable out there. You can throw them at those guys and at least slow them down. You're not necessarily going to stop Damian Lillard or CJ McCollum, but you can definitely slow them down, and make them work. And missing Bradley and Rondo, I think, is really going to hurt them in the long run here in the playoffs. Now, we'll see if LeBron and AD can just take it to another level, which obviously we've seen LeBron do it many times in the playoffs. Um, if they can just take it to another level and just take over the game like we've seen them do before, I don't think it's going to matter, because not many teams in the Western Conference could have a guy that could really match up with Anthony Davis. Portland has Nurkic and Collins, but again, they're only going to really just slow him down. They're not going to necessarily contain him. So it's going to be fun to watch. There's going to be a lot of good first round matchups. Even Clippers Dallas. I know I mentioned earlier that Dallas is unfortunate for Dallas because the Clippers are probably gonna beat them, but I'm hoping Luka could really stretch that series out. So it'll definitely be fun to watch. And in the East, if the standings stay where they are now, you're going to have a Philly Boston series in the first round, which is going to be fun to watch, especially seeing how Philly plays without Ben Simmons for the rest of the year. It'll definitely be interesting. So now, I wanted to kind of start a new thing this week. Probably gonna do it every week moving forward. Um, I'm going to kind of talk about some gambling picks that I like for the day or for the week, and really kind of just kind of give you guys an idea of some potential good gambling picks that you guys can put some money on. I'm coming up with a name for this segment. Don't really have too many ideas right now. If you guys have any ideas, you can send me a message on social media on Twitter, or shoot me an email. I will give the podcast email out here at the end of the episode. Um, so I actually use the Action Network to track my bets. But good thing I like about Action Network is that they actually pull the best odds from all the sites. So you're gonna get the best odds available for the specific bet you're placing. Now, for today, I there's a few bets that I like for today actually. So we have the Washington Capitals playing against the Islanders later today at 2 p.m. Central. I like the over 5.5 goals in that game. Both teams have really good offenses. Both teams are fast. They're skilled. The defenses on both teams like to jump up in the offense to create more plays. So I think this game definitely has the potential of going over the 5.5 goals. Now for NBA, we have Indiana at plus 7.5 against Houston. Um, Now, Indiana, they have the MVP bubble, in my opinion, with TJ Warren. That guy has been playing lights out since entering the bubble. He is an offensive beast. He is keeping Indiana where they need to be in the playoff seedings. With no Oladipo, Warren has really kind of stepped up and filled that void. And that's why I like Indiana in this spot here against Houston. I think Houston's seating is all but set now. So I'm not sure how they're going to treat Harden's and Westbrook's minutes today, but Indiana I think can easily cover that 7.5. Now keep in mind this bet actually I'm just checking right now. This bet now actually the line has changed to Indiana +8, so it's even a better bet right now against Houston. So I definitely like them to cover that against Houston. I also like Denver at +5 against the Clippers. Now, Denver, again, their seating's pretty much set, but they're I think still trying to kind of work out some kinks, kind of get in the rhythm. So they're going to be playing all their guys. And the Clippers, again, they're the number 2 seed. That's set in stone. They're notorious for giving Kawhi and Paul George rest. And I haven't heard anything yet for today's game, but I assume one of them was probably going to be resting, if not both. Um, and I really like the Denver here. I really like Denver here at +5 to cover that against the Clippers. And I also like the under. Under set at 227.5 points. So if Kawhi and Paul George or both of them are resting, I think it's going to be hard for the Clippers to make up those points and get to where they need to help contribute to that over under. And same with Denver. I think Denver, they're not notoriously known as a high scoring team. So I think with that being known, as well as Kawhi and Paul George potentially resting tonight, I definitely like the Nuggets to cover 5, and I like the under at 227.5 points for them. So those are my bets for the day. Like I said, this is a segment that I'm planning on doing every week moving forward. I'll start doing some future bets and weekly bets. Right now, I wanted to keep it simple. Um, so that kind of wraps up today. That wraps up today's episodes, guys. Once again, you can follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at the number 5 for podcasting, no spaces. And you can follow myself personally on Twitter at avpatel730. You can also email us at 5forpodcasting@gmail.com. That's 5 spelled out for podcasting at gmail.com. So if you have any questions, if you have any topic suggestions, if you have any comments, concerns, feedback, all that is welcome. Please feel free to share that with me and the podcast. Now, moving forward, new episodes will be coming out every Wednesday. That is the plan that I am shooting for, and that gives a decent amount of topics for for me to talk about and to hopefully entertain you guys. So, like I said, if you guys have any questions, any comments, concerns, feedback, feel free to email me at 5forpodcasting at gmail.com. That's 5 spelled out for podcasting at gmail.com. And hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. See you next Wednesday.